In a follow-up, I think Councilmember Kagawa started the train of thought about, compromise or meeting halfway, that kind of thing. Several people, including many employees, have said, can't we all work together? Can't we compromise? Can't we do this? And so just looking at the various provisions in the bill, let's start with disclosure. Can any of you agree to the disclosure provisions contained within the bill as it's written? We can, no. So I'll take the silence as a no. Is that fair? Is that fair? Okay. Could any of you disclose to me the amount of general use pesticides that you use on an annual basis? General use pesticides being not restricted use pesticides. I've got that information and we've shared it. But on the general use pesticides that you use on an annual basis, are any of you willing to disclose that amount? So I'll take the silence as a no also. And you can see maybe a little of the frustration that the community might feel, and when the doctors in the community don't know what is being applied either. The buffer zones. If the buffer zones were amended to take out drainage ditches and irrigation ditches and only focus on streams where living things are in there or that reach the ocean, and take out interior roads and only leave in state and county roads, which was the intent of in the first place. If they were amended, would any of you be able to accept the buffer zone requirement? Okay, so I'll take that as a no also. The open air testing of experimentals. Are any of you using experimental pesticides or have experimental use permits as defined in the bill at the present time? I'll take that as a no. I mean, unless you were going to say.
No, not as defined in the bill.
Okay, as defined in the bill is my question.
And we were asked some questions about this, which we responded to very specifically on that. I think part of it, too, is the descriptor term that was used for experimental pesticide was not something that we fully understood, but for experimental use permits, we had received a letter of request of information and had responded to that twice. But at the present time, as defined in the bill, none of you are using experimental or have use permits. Okay.
We currently have a federal experimental use permit for a pesticide, which involves a pesticide when you use a pesticide for one product and it's not approved on another, i.e. we have one that's approved for corn and other products, but it's not approved for soybean, and we're using it on soybean.
Okay.
And that one's almost concluded. And
so would open air, the prohibition of open air testing prohibit you from using that pesticide?
As I interpret your bill, I believe so.
Okay. And as the experimental genetically modified organisms are defined in the ordinance, what amount of land do you currently have under cultivation that meets the definition where you're growing those experimental pesticides? I mean, experimental genetically modified organizations. So you've got X number of thousand acres. How many acres are you using for the experimental GMOs as defined in the ordinance?
So we did respond to that question.
Yeah, you said a small amount, so I'm looking for an acreage amount.
And in response to Councilwoman Yukimura's letter, we did give a range of acres. And again, the term experimental genetically engineered crop isn't something that is a terminology that's used to define these, but we looked at that as perhaps meaning regulated genetically engineered crops and did give a response to that. It is a small number of acres, and for us it can range anywhere from 50 to 150. It depends on the year, the season.
So this year and this season, this time right now?
Right now we're actually in between seasons, and planting's just beginning, so now it would be very, very small.
So less than an acre, less than 100 acres?
You know, I don't want to commit to a figure that might be incorrect, but I believe it would be 20 acres plus or minus.
Okay, so Pioneer, 20 acres.
But at this particular time, and it varies by year.
Okay, the other companies?
Right now, we're at a very low period. I would say probably 5% of our acres.
And how many acres is 5%?
Well, we're farming about 500 acres right now, so.
So 25 acres
About 25
would qualify
acres.
for the, okay, and
With Dalgary, I'm guessing around 20 acres, but
20 acres.
I can get you the exact numbers.
okay, thank you. And was there one more response?
I don't know the exact acres. It's very small right now. This time of year is very low. But if you're asking whether, the reason for asking this question is to understand the impact on our business. I think that's inaccurate.
That's what?
It's not very useful because our business is a little different than theirs. We're always into new products and new development. Basically, if the moratorium stops new development, it's like asking a car company, don't design a new car for
No,
2 years.
This is about the prohibition of open air testing, so.
Yeah, I know.
So what would be the acres?
I don't have a number. It's very small.
Okay, small as in like 5 or 10
Yeah.
or 100 or 5 or 10, okay. And I hate to rush, but I've only got 10 minutes too, like everybody else, and we're going to lunch. And I believe you addressed this question, and I was sidetracked on the your expansion plans. I believe the first two said you don't have any expansion plans. Pioneer said you're looking at Kalepa, possibly, there have been some discussions.
We always look at what our options are. We have no plans to expand in terms of number of acres.
Okay, and, okay, so in terms of a moratorium's impact on the number of acres, that would be minimal impact or no impact at all, according to your present plans, is that correct? And I don't want to take silence for a no on this one, because you just said that you don't have any plans to expand. So if the moratorium affected primarily expansion of your land, the moratorium would have no effect on your plans.
I think this is some of what we need more clarity on. When I read through that several times, it meant to me new products
But
coming
my
in.
question is, if we're talking about expansion of your lands, so if we assume that for a second, then the moratorium would have no impact at all on your companies, based on what you just said, because you have no plans to expand. A follow-up question. Many people have asked me about Kaua'i. Are any of you in discussions, or have you been in discussions with Kaua'i owners in terms of expanding your operations at Kaua'i?
No?
Okay. Silence is no? Is that, okay. Silence is no? Okay, and so the temporary moratorium, if it was just on expansion, would you be able to support that? If it was just on expansion of lands?
I just want to clarify, Councilman, that it's not expansion of product development, it's just an expansion of acreage? Is that what you're saying?
That's my assumption at this moment. The question is based on that assumption. If the moratorium was primarily, was focused on expansion of lands, would you be able to accept the moratorium? And my clock is ticking.
I just think the idea of moratorium on a business is just
Okay.
one of handcuffing.
I understand. I was just trying to, again, we're looking for common ground, and we're trying to, I think it's clear that there's an issue in the community, and we're trying to look for resolutions. The EIS, or an EIS-like study, if the county decided to embark on a comprehensive, robust study of the impacts of the industry and pesticide use in our community, would you also oppose that? The silence can be a no.
We would
also.
certainly like to have this go back to the agencies that are tasked with the oversight that already, for instance, with genetically
Okay,
engineered
wait,
crops,
I'm-
USDA already
I'm going
collects.
to interrupt you for a second. So the question is, would you oppose the county conducting a robust, comprehensive study on the impacts of the industry with a caveat that it doesn't cost you a dime? Would you oppose that? Or do you support that? That way I'll let your silence be a no. I mean, it's up to you. If
You represent the county, so you should represent what the county's wishes. I mean, I don't know why we have a say in that or not.
So in terms of supporting or opposing, you would not oppose it if the county decided they wanted to do something? I mean, in previous testimony, we were told that every single element of the bill was being opposed, and I'm just trying to get clear on this. So I'm out of time. We can go to, I appreciate your thought about working together, working with the community. But I have to point out also, Mark, you mentioned the Waimea Canyon School Voluntary Buffer Zone. I think it's important that the community know that that voluntary buffer zone only happened after multiple incidences of children and teachers getting sick, and the legislature, where myself and others working for 4 months, the community testifying and pushing and pushing and pushing, and then Syngenta finally said, okay, let's do it this way. It wasn't an easy process. It wasn't let's all work together in the community process. Pioneer, I appreciate your willingness to work with the community. I think it's important to note that there's 100+ citizens suing Pioneer because it has not been successful. And in my opinion, to work with the community needs some basic information. For me to meet with you to figure out what's going on, I need to know, the community needs to know what's going on. And so, for the record, I'd ask you again, are you willing to comply with disclosing the chemicals that you're using on an annual basis as in the bill? If you can answer, people have complained they hadn't heard an answer because I took silence as a no, but if you could each answer the question.
I would say that I feel it's really important that this information has to be communicated in some context, and as it's written in the bill, I don't think it's a proper context.
Okay, so would you say no is the answer?
I would say that I don't think I would want to comply with the bill as is.
Okay. Mark?
I don't think it's a yes or no answer at this point, Kerry. I think what it is it's more of what needs to be disclosed, how's the context,
Okay. With all due respect, I asked you an hour ago if you would tell me today how much general use pesticides you're using, and you said no with your silence. Okay, Councilmember Yukimura asked you earlier, would you comply with providing information on the RUPs for 2012? You effectively told her no. And so I think it's a fair question to ask. How do you have a community conversation without the facts?
I think my answer was more to the fact that there is a bill, I believe it's Bill 105 in the state ledge, that's going to put out the disclosure for the RUPs. And as another part of that bill, those in charge of looking into it are also supposed to look at other states, their disclosures, how they do things.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move on. That bill does not affect general use pesticides at all. Okay, in conversations with the industry, I'm told everything that glyphosate is harmless. You can put your hands in it, you can use it every day, and no harm at all. That's the word I get from the industry. Okay, and yet you won't tell us, you won't tell our community how much you're using on a regular basis. Okay, and how do you have a conversation if you're not going to give us the basic information? Go ahead, sir. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think when you look at our perspective, we did provide the RUP data, and I think that given the right reporting structure, that Dow would probably be open. But what we would ask is, since general use is such a broad class of pesticides, that other general use pesticide users within the county would also be willing to contribute to that agreed upon format.
Okay, so that's almost a yes. Thank you very much. Pioneer. And I mean that in a friendly way, don't get me wrong. I mean, it's just, yes.
So as we're looking at and talking about the bill evolving and changing, we would look at other language as it's developed, and we do believe that, look, we share the concern for the community, the interest of the community. We certainly understand there's a desire to know more, and with the spirit that you have for introducing the bill.
Okay.
But the answer to that is, as is, we would want to see amendments, and we'd want to see it evolve.
Okay, so thank you. I take that as a no. I'll make my interpretations as we go through as far as my personal interpretation. Mr. Katayama, yes.
Again, let us know what information you need, and we'll provide it. And I think you need to have proper context.
Okay, with all due respect, I've asked for this information on several occasions in writing, and the question is simple. What is the annual use of the general use pesticides that your company is using? And I have yet to get the answer. And that's to a big degree why we're here today. You know, we cannot, how do we have a community conversation without the information that the community can then base its decision on? That's the question.
Again, out of context, absolute numbers mean very little.
I'm talking about my context, okay? I'm the chair of the committee. The council's entertaining a bill.
I thought this was a community issue.
This is an issue that is before the council. It's a bill that's there, and it's very clear. I'm asking, and I've asked repeatedly, and I've been unable to get the information. Thank you for sharing what you've shared with me. If I can move on. Okay, in terms of genetically modified organisms that you're growing in our community, are you willing, in order to have a conversation, the bill says disclosure of that, a general description of the genetic modified organisms that you're growing in our community. Are you willing to disclose that?
So there already is a list.
No, but the
that's
bill calls
kept.
for providing a list. Would you provide the list as according to the ordinance?
Again, we would look at generally what we're doing and describe what we're doing, but we do not provide information on the very specifics of an individual gene or an
Right.
individual
If you look at the
piece
bill,
of information.
The bill asks for a certain type of disclosure. It doesn't ask for specific trade secrets or anything. It's a general description. Would any of you be willing to disclose that? Again, in the spirit of having a community conversation, we need to know what activity is happening. Otherwise, we're having a communication in the dark.
The bill does ask for location,
Yes.
and we've had eco-terrorism happen on our farm, actually.
The bill asks for a
And so-
TMK or a hupua'a. Okay, does not ask for a specific location of a specific 1 acre, quarter-acre plot. My understanding, the TMKs are 1,000 acres. They're fairly large portions usually. I'm done. Thank you very much.